I always hold up the screenshot if I have one at the beginning of the video, hoping that YouTube will capture that as one of the possible thumbnails, and it never does. Instead, it'll be this or something. Anyway, I haven't finished reading anything to talk about today, but I did think that maybe I could take this opportunity to talk about a recommendation I have for Shorty September. If you've never read this book, I know I've talked about it before on the channel. I don't know if I gave it its own video, but it's The Hound of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle. It's a Sherlock Holmes novel. I think it's, from what I've read I've read all of Sherlock Holmes. I've read a few other things by Doyle, and I do believe this is my favorite work of his, and I think it is his best work. White Company accepted, because I haven't read that, so I don't know. Anyway, you probably know who Sherlock Holmes is. If you don't, I don't know what to tell you. It is also available. This book is very short. Like I said, it's perfect for Shorty September. Here's the Project Gutenberg version cover, which I thought I'd bring up just to remind myself to let you know that it is free on Project Gutenberg and probably other places. You can probably get it from any library. There's many editions. There's been, according to Wikipedia, I read to this date, there's been 20 film adaptations, film or television adaptations. My favorite one is a 1959 Hammer horror movie starring Peter Cushing as Sherlock Holmes, and that is Christopher Lee in the background, not as Watson, of course, but as Sir Henry Baskerville. The focus of the novel, I almost said protagonist. I don't know who is the protagonist. I suppose it is Sherlock Holmes. But one thing that strikes me about this novel and the other, and among distinguished among the Sherlock Holmes stories, is I believe this could have been a great novel even without Sherlock Holmes in it. Using some kind of generic other team or police or whatever. It's a borderline. Maybe not even borderline. It's a gothic novel. It's a borderline horror novel, a terror novel. Some might say, which is a term I've heard used for books that don't have any supernatural horror, but are scary books. It is so well written. It is so intricately plotted. Magnificent. It also has relatively little amount of Sherlock Holmes in it. He's off screen for much of the book, which really allows Watson to shine. And people who are Watson aficionados, and there are many of us, really enjoy the book for that reason too. Watson is a great character. He's very useful. He's very capable. He's not a bumbler. He's not anything like he's often portrayed in some of the versions. He's in some of the early versions of radio and Hollywood and all that. He's not really a comic character. He is a very capable ally and companion to Holmes. And their friendship is a great element of the series. And it's a friendship based on respect, even though Holmes doesn't really have respect for anyone else's intellect. It would be hard for him to, since he's so much smarter than anyone, except maybe Professor Moriarty, so he has a hard time respecting the police or whoever, and that's a trait of Holmes's character. He's a bit cold and antiseptic towards people, and another distinction of this book, which I think makes it so good, so great to read on its own, even without reading the whole canon or anything. I mean, you're not going to need to be caught up on the backstory. There's not much backstory in any of these books or stories, but is the stakes in this book are very high. That's not always the case in every short story of Sherlock Holmes. The initial first appearance of Sherlock Holmes was in 1887 in A Study in Scarlet, which was a novel, which is also an excellent novel. It's the first, if you want to know how they met and that kind of stuff. It is also a pretty well involved plot involving different elements. I don't know that Doyle, when he was writing it, conceived of a long-running series character, but it turned out very popular. So a couple years later, he wrote his second novel, The Sign of the Four, which I don't have that much recollection of. I really think of the novels, the best one is Hound of the Baskervilles. After The Sign of the Four, 1890, the character was even more popular, and these had both those novels had appeared as serials in the Strand magazine. I don't know if they were both in the Strand, but anyway, they were serials, magazine serials. Then he wrote two further groups of serials, 12 each, which were later collected in books of short stories, the first being The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes in 1892, and then The Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes in 1894. Two things about those. That's where we really see Holmes emerges as this very intellectual characters, more interested in problems than in. Let me look at the lists in here. There's some with very high stakes, but there are many with very low stakes. I would say the high point of the short stories would be The Adventure of the Speckled Band, which was in The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. I think that's probably the best collection, the first collection, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. But there's characters in there, like A Case of Identity, The Red-Headed League, where the stakes are relatively benign and there might be a crime involved. Holmes doesn't really seem particularly interested in the people involved, and this is not the case in the Hound of the Baskervilles, because what we have is a curse on this family, the Baskerville noble family. I forget anyway, there's an estate at stake. The master of the estate is killed, as many of the previous masters of the estate have been killed by being cursed by this devil hound, this supernatural devil hound that haunts them to death, gives them heart attacks. And a new master of the estate is coming in. He's been abroad and he's coming to take over. There's threats on his life as soon as he gets to London. His friends encourage him to hire Sherlock Holmes to basically save his life, to protect his life. So the stakes are high because there is a crime yet to be committed, which is the murder of the current master of Baskerville, and there's quite a story there. There's a couple of stories going on at the same time. There's Baskerville taking over the estate, falling in love with a neighbor, possibly. There's some weird goings on with the staff that are a holdover from the previous novel. From the previous household, the recently murdered relative, and there's a lot going on. If I were thinking back, I would think this would be a 300 or 400 page novel, but I know it isn't because I've read it so many times, because it's really tightly plotted. There's great atmosphere, the moors in England, and the ruins, Neolithic ruins, which is I really enjoy reading about in this. It puts it in that gothic, almost supernatural realm because of these ruins from Neolithic times that are in there, that are all over England, that so different than the United States, to have that back in time. So after the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes, which is the last book Doyle published about Holmes until the Hound of Baskervilles. He was so sick of the character after publishing 4 books, 2 collections of short stories and 2 novels, that he killed the character off in the Final Problem, the adventure of the Final Problem. Holmes is killed off to everybody's consternation, the fans, and this doesn't come up that often, but Doyle's next attempt to sort of revive the character was to write a play or commission a play. I'm not sure which, because I don't have the information here, based on the character, which was not very popular apparently. But he still kept coming back to the character. One thing that cast doubt on how definitive Doyle was in killing off this character is that at the end of the Final Problem, there's no body. Moriarty and Holmes disappear over the Reichenbach Falls, and no bodies are to be found. One theory is, that Doyle was such a great storyteller, they knew that you had to leave readers with hope. The other would be that he, gave himself an out in case he wanted to go back to the character. So, however, as I said, his first attempt to go back to the character was a play that didn't do so well. Then, in which year is it? 1899, 1905? I can't remember. Okay, 1905 is The Return. So before that, he wrote. In 1901, 1902, he wrote and serialized The Hound of the Baskervilles, which was a prequel. So it's this event, its preference is made clear in the narration that, this is from the casebook. Now it can be told about Sherlock Holmes now that Holmes is deceased, and now that the great family of Baskervilles, the story can be told. And this is the novel we're talking about now, The Hound of the Baskervilles, which is so brilliant and ironically would never have been written if Doyle had stuck to his guns and left the character dead at the end of the memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. Instead, he ended up producing some of his best work after the alleged death of the character. And then finally, a couple of years after that, he would just give up and bring Holmes back to life in The Return of Sherlock Holmes, 1905. And there's some good stories in that too. After that, there's 2 more books. In 1917, 1927, His Last Bow and The Casebook of Sherlock Holmes, respectively. Those are not my favorite books, although there's a couple good ones in there. The Adventure of the Sussex Vampire, for example, is in the final book, The Casebook of Sherlock Holmes, and that's pretty good. And it is, I guess, I showing my prejudice of style of Holmes stories by mentioning The Adventure of the Sussex Vampire, the Adventure of the Speckled Band, and The Hound of the Baskervilles, because these are all supernatural adjacent stories where there's something allegedly supernatural going on, and we'll have to see if there's supernatural stories or not. Holmes is, of course, a skeptic about this kind of thing. What really matters, though, is the belief of the characters who are under threat, and whether they believe in the supernatural or not. Henry Baskerville begins to believe in it at a certain point. Well, I don't want to go into what he does because that's probably too spoilery. I want you to just read the book. You can read it in a few hours. And it's so good because it's so tightly plotted. It has a lot of history, a lot of backstory. And I do also recommend this version, this movie version. I got to get back to my camera here. The Hammer movie version is one of my favorite Hammer movies, probably one of my 2 favorite Hammer movies, the other being The Brides of Dracula, which stars Peter Cushing as Van Helsing and does not does not show Dracula himself, because I guess Christopher Lee was tired of playing Dracula at this time. A little theme here about people not wanting to do what's popular with their fans, which I guess is a thing that happens, and we should all be so lucky that what we want to create is beloved, but I guess some people don't see it that way. Anyway, there is, strangely, and I'll see if I can find this on. I'm not recommending it, but I'll put it in the notes if I can find it, because very weirdly, 9 years after Peter Cushing did this Hammer film, he played Sherlock Holmes on television, on British television, in two movies, two specials, or two-parters, I think, and they redid the Hound of the Baskervilles. So Peter Cushing's been in two versions of this, and the other is 1968. It is available on YouTube, or at least it was a couple days ago. So if it's still up there, I'll link to it, but I could not watch it. It's production values of the 60s BBC shows isn't that great by modern standards. So often it's worth it for the writing, for like say Quatermass episode or something like that, or other things. But we've got the good version in terms of a Hammer movie, so I'd watch that. I know people like others, people like Jeremy Brett. Again, I couldn't get into those that much. I do like, and this is sacrilege too, I do like the old Basil Rathbone movies, but you have to really look at them as a different kind of thing. The way to watch the Basil Rathbone movies, I believe, is the way you would watch the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock series, or at least the first couple seasons, which were pretty decent, but they're quite different. The Basil Rathbone and Bruce Nigel movies are quite different, because they really emphasize a lot of comedy. Nigel Bruce is kind of an affront to Nigel Bruce's performance of Watson is kind of an affront to really hardcore Holmes fans, because it really disrespects the character. But if you watch them as their own kind of different thing, I think they're fun, at least some of them. And sadly, this was the only Hammer Studios Sherlock Holmes movie. I think they planned to do a couple others. I don't know what happened. I want to look at one more thing to talk about. Oh, the Baskerville effect. Sometimes movies, or particular stories, resonate so much with the public, or that they become very useful metaphors for different things, or used in science. Just like Greek myths are. When they talk about various complexes of things. But there is a so-called Baskerville effect, which is based on which was a term created in a study at the University of California, San Diego, back in, what year does it say? 2002, not that long ago, where they talk about the phenomenon of self-fulfilling prophecy of heart attacks going up at times when events, according to calendar events or whatever, when people believe something unlucky is happening to them. For example, Friday the 13th, or an unlucky month in various different calendars of different cultures, and track that apparently heart attacks do tend to go up in a time when people think that they are a victim of some kind of curse, or under some kind of curse. So I thought that was kind of interesting side note. Really, if anyone's read it recently and has any opinion of it, or if anybody decides to take it on for Shorty September, I think it's a great introduction to the character. You can go back and read the other stories later if you want. I think you'll be sucked in. It is really an involving short novel, such a joy to read, and I guess I will have to read it again soon. Okay, talk to you later.